The weak Seattle morning light filtered through the gap in the curtains, painting a pale stripe across my small apartment. The silence was so profound I could hear the familiar hiss of the espresso machine blend with the rich scent of freshly roasted coffee beans. Ethan usually started the day with my habitual run around the neighborhood, but today a subtle unease had crept in. It was a premonition, a cold whisper of something impending that kept me from fully savoring the morning's peace. I finished brewing my coffee and settled into my armchair by the window, looking out at the deserted street where yellow leaves rustled softly in the gentle breeze. Everything appeared normal, yet a deep-seated instinct told me this normality was merely a facade. The aroma of coffee, the distant chirping of birds, the weak sunlight, everything was too perfectly mundane to prelude the disruption I sensed. I took a slow sip, letting the mild bitterness ground me, trying to steady my mind, but it felt as though the whole world around me was subtly shifting towards a point of instability. Every falling leaf, every ray of light piercing the curtain hinted at an unusual interruption in the ordinary rhythm of life. The living room door clicked, and Sophie walked in. She was dressed simply in a gray sweater and jeans, but her eyes held a gravity that was anything but soft. It was a serious, almost clinical look that instantly made the room feel alien and made me feel strangely disconnected. She stopped in the middle of the room, scanning, as if measuring every small detail. The furniture, the books I'd left on the shelf, even the still-steaming coffee cup on the table. Ethan, we need to talk. Her voice was quiet, yet each word landed with a heavy finality. A warning I couldn't possibly ignore. My heart rate jumped. Every time Sophie used that line, I felt an invisible pressure building. I set my coffee down, took a deep breath, and forced myself to remain calm. I knew this wasn't going to be about easy jokes or everyday chatter. The mounting anxiety made me want to get up and pace, but I held my silence, watching her. She took a step closer, then continued. What would you think if we had to move this apartment? It's just too small for both of us now. A jolt of cold ran down my spine, my heart threatening to skip a beat. Move to small. I looked around at the relics of our life. The desk lamp I bought with my first paycheck, the framed photos, the books piled high. All of it suddenly felt fragile, easily broken. I inhaled deeply, trying to maintain a semblance of composure as I asked, I get what you're saying, but why the sudden urgency? Sophie paused, then met my gaze directly. Because I need more than this. I need space, privacy. And you know what, Ethan? I feel like we're standing still. Her words were a quiet, sharp knife slicing through the peaceful morning. I sat frozen, unable to articulate a response. My heart was an unbearable knot of tension that the silence in the room stretched, punctuated only by the faint tick of the clock and the cooling coffee. I watched Sophie, her shoulders squared, her gaze steady, a stark contrast to the girl I thought I knew. Part of me wanted to reach for her hand, to reassure her everything would be fine. But another part feared that any word spoken now would only be the wrong one. I stood up, slowly walking around the room, picking up and rearranging small objects as if searching for safety in the familiar. Every movement was deliberate, every slow step heavy with thought. Sophie watched, saying nothing, only occasionally taking a deep breath, her eyes tracking my every action. I turned back to her, my voice lower than usual. Sophie, I want to understand. I need to know what you really want. She moved silently towards the window, looking out, her eyes distant. The sunlight haloed her hair, outlining her profile, but failed to soften the tension that gripped the room. I studied her every subtle expression, the slight frown, the rhythm of her breathing, all communicating a seriousness I had never witnessed before. The clock ticked sluggishly, yet my thoughts were racing. I flashed back to our shared moments, the mornings with coffee, the late-night movies, the insignificant little conversations, and suddenly, it all felt as ephemeral as smoke. And in that precise moment, the realization hit me clearly. Today, everything was going to change. It wasn't just about the apartment, or moving out, it was about us. And the relationship I had always trusted might never be the same again. The silence in the apartment stretched, broken only by the methodical tick of the wall clock and the faint aroma of cooling coffee. Ethan stood there staring at Sophie, my heart pounding a rhythm of unspoken questions I hadn't dared to voice. She was still looking out the window, a hand resting lightly on the frame, her gaze distant, as if searching for something I couldn't possibly reach. Sophie, are you absolutely sure this is what you want? My voice was low, strained, a facade of calmness, barely masking the anxiety and dread churning inside me. She turned back, her eyes sharp yet filled with an undeniable pain. You know, Ethan, I've thought about this relentlessly. I've tried to feel fulfilled with this apartment, with you, with everything we have, but I can't. I feel trapped, constrained, and I need a change. I stood immobilized, trying to swallow the lump forming in my throat. Her words felt like tiny needles, systematically piercing my resolve, creating wounds that only time could hope to mend. I wanted to argue, to defend our life, to hold on to her, but every retort in my head seemed meaningless. Misplaced. Sophie moved toward the dining table, her fingers gently touching the vase of flowers I'd bought just yesterday. A seemingly ordinary action, yet to me, it carried immense significance now. I noticed a slight tremor in her hand, suggesting she was struggling just as much with her own decision. Look, I truly don't want to hurt you, Ethan. I really don't. But if I stay silent, if I continue on here, both of us will lose so much more in the end. I sank back into my chair, my eyes locked on hers. Her admission resonated, but deep down, it felt like a soft, sharp blade cutting into the emotional fabric we had woven together over the months. I recalled the happy days, the shared coffee mornings, the evenings watching movies side by side, the small, warm conversations. All of it suddenly felt fragile, ready to dissipate. I began to pace the room again. Slow steps, intently observing everything, searching for an anchor to steady myself. But inside, a chaotic storm was brewing. I wanted to ask her, if you leave, what's left of us? But the voice caught in my throat. Instead, I could only watch her, waiting, hoping she would elaborate. Sophie took a deep breath, then sat down on the sofa across from me, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes still unwavering on mine. Ethan, I want to try living separately for a while. We need to take a break, just for a little while, for me to truly understand myself, and for you to understand what we truly need. My heart squeezed. Part of me wanted to nod, to agree and give her the space she requested, but the other part was so tense I wanted to scream, to grab her and refuse to let her go. Every memory, every moment we had shared, suddenly felt precariously balanced, as if a slight breeze could sweep it all away. I inhaled deeply, forcing the words out. Sophie, I don't want to lose you. I'll do anything to understand you, to be with you, but if you leave, what am I supposed to do? She met my gaze, her eyes reaching the depths of my soul. You have to trust me. Trust that this is the best thing for both of us. You need to understand that this distance isn't about breaking up. It's about finding ourselves. A heavy, profound silence descended upon the room once more. I felt the fear, the powerlessness, but also a strange respect for her conviction. I observed every nuance of Sophie's face, the slight furrow of her brow, the tempo of her breathing, and realized she was genuinely wrestling with her own emotions. I sat motionless, closing my eyes for a moment, trying to sort through the chaotic mess of my thoughts. Everything in the apartment suddenly felt hyper-real. A loud tick of the clock, the lingering coffee scent, the sunlight streaming onto the floor, emphasizing that today, everything was irrevocably changing. The space was quiet, but my heart was not. Part of me longed to hold on to Sophie, yet another part accepted that I had to let her go. I realized this wasn't just about the apartment or physical distance. It was the turning point of our relationship, where our trust, our love, and our patience would all be severely tested. I let out a long sigh, looking at Sophie one last time, at the way the light shimmered in her hair, and told myself, no matter what, today, we were walking through a new door, and I had no idea where that door would lead us. After the heavy silence of the morning, the apartment suddenly felt small, oppressively so. Ethan sat on the sofa, his hands trembling as they gripped the cup of cold coffee. Each swallow seemed to pull him deeper into a pit of helplessness. Sophie remained silent, her eyes on him, but it was clear she was also wrestling with an intense inner conflict. Ethan, do you understand? This isn't just about the apartment, or needing space. I feel like I am slowly losing myself in this relationship. Sophie's voice wasn't a shout, but it was thick with both pain and firm resolve. Ethan's heart constricted. He knew Sophie wasn't exaggerating. Every action, every subtle look had quietly signaled this for a long time, but hearing it directly was still stunning. What are you talking about, Sophie? Losing yourself, But I'm here. I've always tried. We've faced everything together. Ethan tried to argue, his voice strained with confusion and a rising sense of desperation. Sophie took a deep breath, turning fully to face him. You don't understand, Ethan. You think you know me, but the truth is, I feel lonely, even when I'm right next to you, and I'm afraid that if I don't do something, we'll actually lose each other for good. Her words hit him like a physical shock. prompting Ethan to stand and pace the room, his hands shaking as he touched familiar objects. He looked around, as if searching for proof, a sign that Sophie didn't truly want to leave, but everything was silent, hopeless. So what do you want, Sophie? Do you want to break up? Ethan asked, his voice low, on the verge of cracking. Sophie shook her head, but her eyes glistened. Not completely break up, just temporary distance, space for both of us to rediscover ourselves, but, if you can't accept that, then yes, this will be the end. Ethan. The apartment became unbearably heavy. Ethan stood still, a wave of emptiness and agony spreading through his body. He recalled Sophie's laughter, the cozy movie nights, the seemingly mundane yet warm moments they shared. Now they all felt like fragile shards, ready to shatter and vanish. Sophie walked closer, her voice barely a whisper. You will be okay, Ethan. But I need this space. I need freedom, just once. Not to forget you, but to truly understand my own heart. Ethan turned his back to the window, clenching the curtain fabric tightly. He knew that agreeing to this would be the hardest step of his life. Refusing would mean losing Sophie forever. Both choices felt like a sharp, internal wound. The silence lingered, marked only by the clocks ticking and their labored breathing. Ethan took a deep, shaky breath, looking back at Sophie, realizing, today, their relationship was facing its first real trial, a brutal test of trust, love, and patience. Suddenly, Sophie spoke up again, her tone revealing a surprising vulnerability. Did you know, yesterday I took a call from my mother, she said. She said I need to stand on my own 2 feet, that I can't depend on anyone, not even you. I don't want to disappoint you, but I'm afraid if I don't listen to her, I'll disappoint myself. Ethan froze. He hadn't known about the call, a small secret, yet enough to fuel his sense of powerlessness and internal conflict. Everything he thought he understood about them suddenly blurred. He realized that Sophie wasn't just confronting him, she was fighting a battle with herself. So, what should I do, Sophie? Should I wait for you, or let you go? Ethan finally managed, his voice choked, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Sophie didn't answer immediately. She just looked at him, then gave a slight, quiet nod, a silent agreement, yet heavier than any verbal confirmation. Ethan felt both the pain and the strange flicker of hope in that moment. He realized that this distance wasn't just a challenge, but perhaps an opportunity if they could navigate it. Would their love emerge stronger, or would they lose each other permanently? Ethan's pulse raced, his thoughts a tangled mess. He knew that after today, nothing would ever be the same. And as Sophie turned away, her gaze still lingering on him, Ethan accepted one truth. This wasn't just a conversation, it was a turning point, where both of them had to confront fear, helplessness, and the true meaning of their love. The morning slowly gave way to the early afternoon. Sunlight, now slightly brighter, filtered softly through the curtains, casting thin streaks across the hardwood floor. Ethan stood in the middle of the apartment, his hand resting on the table, looking at familiar objects that now felt profoundly alien. Every item seemed to remind him that today was fundamentally unlike any day before. Sophie sat on the sofa, her shoulders slightly slumped, eyes downcast, occasionally glancing towards Ethan. The air between them was taut, stretched like a string about to snap. Ethan knew that one wrong move from him, one forced argument, could shatter everything. Ethan, I know you're trying, but I genuinely need space. I need freedom for a while. Sophie's voice was trembling, yet still underlined by firm resolution. Ethan's heart ached. He wanted to scream, to pull her into a tight embrace, to fiercely protect what they had built. But he knew, instinctively, that doing so would only make Sophie feel more trapped. Accelerating the end of everything, Ethan walked slowly towards her, his voice low and measured. Sophie, I don't want to lose you. I think I understand what you're asking for, but this distance, do you really think we can survive it? Sophie remained silent for a moment, looking directly into Ethan's eyes, and for the first time, a single tear tracked down her cheek. I don't know, but if I don't try, I'll regret it. So will you. Ethan felt his heart completely splinter. Every memory, every happy moment felt heartbreakingly fragile. He recalled their shared laughter, the late-night movie sessions, the small, warm conversations, all of it now, just fragmented pieces scattered inside him. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a beat, then opened them to look at Sophie. If you truly need this, I will let you go, but I need one thing. You have to promise me, Sophie, that when you come back, we will truly understand each other. No secrets, no doubts, only the absolute truth. Sophie nodded, her voice barely audible. I promise, Ethan, I promise. A long silence ensued, but this time, the tension wasn't hostile. It was deep, heavy, yet it carried a sliver of fragile hope. Ethan knew this decision marked the biggest turning point in his life. A mix of fear, hope, helplessness, and fierce determination converged in that moment. He turned to look at the apartment one last time, his eyes resting on small items that now held a different meaning. Every book, every photograph, every coffee mug, They all seemed to remind him that life wasn't just about the present, but about the hard choices they were about to face. Sophie rose to leave, picking up her coat. Ethan walked over, gently taking her hand, but he didn't pull her back. "We'll be okay, Sophie, however hard this gets. I believe that." His voice was deep, resolute, but tinged with vulnerability. She looked at him, her eyes glistening, and nodded softly. A moment of silence, yet both felt it clearly. There was no going back to how things were. This was the test, and only time would tell if this love would endure or crumble. As Sophie walked out the door, Ethan stood watching, his heart pounding. He knew that even though the impending distance would challenge them, he was ready to face it. But inside, a low-grade fear persisted. If one of them stumbled, if a deeper secret was unearthed, would they ever have a chance to return to each other? The quiet space after Sophie left felt heavier than ever. Ethan sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands, staring out the window where the late afternoon sun was beginning to stretch. In his heart, every emotion, fear, hope, pain, determination blended into a complex tapestry that he knew he had to navigate alone, to protect both his love and himself. And in that moment, Ethan made a silent vow: no matter how long this distance lasts, I won't give up on Sophie. I will wait, and I will understand her better than anyone else. After Sophie left, the apartment became overwhelmingly empty and silent, so much so that Ethan could almost hear his own heartbeat echoing in the stillness. He sat on the sofa, his head buried in his hands, struggling to organize the chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind. The distance that had just been created was no longer merely physical. It was emotional, a chasm of trust, and a repository of unspoken secrets. Ethan recalled Sophie's recent conversations, the times she had frowned, her unusual silences, or texts he'd never seen. It dawned on him that Sophie had likely been carrying her own fears and secrets she had never fully shared. And now, this self-imposed distance was forcing everything to the surface. He rose and walked out onto the balcony, looking down at the street where the late afternoon light was staining the building's gold. In his heart, one question relentlessly repeated: will she truly be happier gone? Will this space help her find herself, or will it pull her away from me forever? The first night without Sophie, Ethan couldn't sleep. He flipped through old journals, rereading her entries, every shared story. Each line evoked happy memories, now painfully intertwined with anxiety, leaving him to wonder if the decision to take a break was the right path. The next day, Ethan received a text message from Sophie. It wasn't a long message, just a short sentence: "Are you okay? I need a little more time." Ethan's heart gave a painful lurch. Part of him was relieved she was thinking of him, but the other part was deeply worried. What pressure is she under? He didn't know, and that ignorance made him feel more helpless than ever before. In the days that followed, Ethan began noticing small signs he had previously overlooked. Sophie had left a few small items behind in the apartment: her favorite book, a worn jacket, a tiny hastily scribbled note, all suggesting she still cared, but was deeply conflicted. One evening, Ethan overheard part of a phone conversation Sophie was having while she was out of the city with a friend. Although he wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, he vaguely caught phrases she spoke about her family, the pressure to become independent, and her worries about a future with Ethan. At that moment, Ethan felt his heart tighten. He realized this distance wasn't just testing their love, it was exposing the secrets and emotions she had meticulously hidden for so long. Ethan sat by the window all night, sipping coffee, questioning what he should do. He knew that if he didn't grasp the situation and act with patience, they would lose each other. But if he could overcome his fear, would their love become stronger? He decided he had to maintain contact, but without applying pressure. He had to give her space, yet remain present in her heart, a challenge Ethan had never faced before. The subsequent days passed in a swirl of emotions: worry, hope, pain, interspersed with small bursts of happiness when he received a text or a small gift Sophie sent. Ethan began to understand that this trial was not merely about physical separation. It was a profound test of patience, trust, and genuine love. And in a quiet moment one afternoon, Ethan realized a key truth. The biggest secret wasn't what Sophie was hiding from him, but how he would maintain his faith and love. even without knowing what lay ahead. The next day the city air was overcast, cold winds sweeping past, rustling leaves across the pavement. Ethan woke early, as was his habit, but his heart was far from calm. Inside, a storm of emotions still raged: anxiety, fear, pain, but now intertwined with a fragile, soaring hope. He walked through the apartment, his hand touching Sophie's forgotten items, the jacket draped over the chair, the half-read book on the table, a few scraps of paper with hurried notes. Each object reminded him that Sophie still existed here, yet she had also partially left, taking with her secrets and a loneliness he had failed to see. Ethan settled by the window, watching the street. Seeing cars pass and figures hurrying along the sidewalk, he wondered, was Sophie truly happy? Did she find freedom, or was she under immense pressure? These questions had no answers, and the lack of knowledge made him feel utterly powerless. Midday, a text from Sophie arrived. "Ethan, I'm coming home today. I need to see you." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs, the mix of anticipation and terror making it impossible to sit still. The brief message ignited every suppressed emotion: hope, anxiety, love, and the paralyzing fear of losing her forever. He quickly tidied up his mind, both expectant and tense. He knew this moment was the pivot point. When Sophie walked into the apartment, their eyes met, and the accumulated distance, pain, and worry of the past days instantly erupted. Ethan moved toward her, his voice shaky. "Sophie, you're back, but I'm scared. What if this time apart has changed you too much?" Sophie was silent for a moment, her eyes glistening. Then she spoke. "Ethan, I've done a lot of thinking. I know that love isn't just about being together. It's about understanding each other. I needed the space to find myself, and now, I'm ready to come back. But on one condition: we have to be honest with each other. No hiding, no doubting. Only the truth." Ethan's heart gave a painful twist, but at the same time, a powerful hope surged within him. He knew this was the final test. If they overcame it, their love would emerge more mature than ever. He took a deep breath, took Sophie's hands in his voice deep and firm. "I agree. We will start over, truly understanding each other. I promise I won't hide anything or doubt you, no matter what comes up." Sophie smiled, her eyes soft, a look of profound relief washing over her face. In that moment, all the tension, the anxiety, the distance vanished. But Ethan understood that love wasn't just a promise. It was action. Every day forward would be a new challenge, but this time, they would face it together. They sat down on the sofa, hand in hand, looking out the window where the afternoon sun slanted through the trees, casting shimmering light streaks on the floor. Ethan felt every subtle movement, every breath from Sophie. Without words, they understood each other: the fear, the hope, the loneliness that the distance had exposed. Ethan sighed. A silent affirmation: the biggest test wasn't the distance or the secrets that surfaced, but the way we chose to face each other, ourselves, and this love. Sophie gently rested her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "I know, it won't be easy, but I want us to try. You won't leave me, right?" Ethan wrapped his arms tightly around her. It felt as though all the previous pain, helplessness, and worry instantly dissolved, replaced by solid determination and unwavering love. "No, Sophie, I won't leave you. No matter the challenge, I'll be here." In that moment, the apartment was flooded with light, the light of forgiveness, of trust, and of a love that had been tested and matured. They knew that many difficulties still lay ahead, but at least, today, they had found each other again, not just physically, but in heart and soul. And deep within Ethan, he grasped a simple yet profound truth. True love isn't the absence of challenges, but the way they choose to overcome everything together, making every moment shared more precious than ever. The next morning, Ethan woke up in the quiet apartment. The room still held the faint aroma of yesterday's coffee, and soft morning light filtered gently through the curtains, creating smooth, pale streaks on the floor. He took a deep breath, a sense of relief spreading through him. Sophie was asleep on the sofa, her head resting on his shoulder. Finally at peace, after a long night of emotional strain, Ethan looked down at her, his eyes shining with affection and deep appreciation. He realized that the recent trial had not only helped them understand each other better, but had also given him profound insight into himself, his fears, his capacity for patience, and the true meaning of love. Sophie stirred, opened her eyes, looked up at Ethan, and offered a soft smile. "Good morning, Ethan." Her voice was slightly husky, but filled with contentment. "Good morning, Sophie," Ethan replied, squeezing her hand tightly. In that moment, all worry and fear seemed to melt away. There was no distance, no lingering doubt, only love, trust, and mutual understanding. Sophie spent time recounting her days apart, the acute loneliness, the moments of intense reflection on their future, and the relentless pressure from her family. Ethan listened without interruption, his eyes following her every expression, wanting to absorb every detail. He knew that maintaining this love required not just promises, but empathy, patience, and the capacity for forgiveness. Ethan, in turn, shared all the emotions he had experienced, the fear of losing her, the moments of utter helplessness when he couldn't know how she was doing, and the small, persistent hope that they would make it through. They laughed, they cried, and they shared the most honest moments they'd had since deciding to separate. The silence that followed was no longer heavy but filled with profound peace. They prepared breakfast together, brewed coffee, listened to music, and talked about their future plans. Every small gesture was an affirmation. They were back together, but this time with a deeper, more mature understanding. Sophie held Ethan's hands, looking deeply into his eyes. I realized, love isn't just about being together when everything is easy. It's about how we stand by each other, even when facing challenges, fear, and those periods of distance. Ethan smiled, a feeling of warmth spreading through his chest. I feel the same way, Sophie. I promise to always listen, to always trust, and to always be here for you, no matter what happens. They stood by the window, looking out at the early city, where the sunlight illuminated the tall buildings, bringing warmth and hope. In that moment, Ethan and Sophie knew they had navigated the hardest stretch of their relationship, and their love was now stronger, deeper, and more resilient. Ethan took a deep breath, a silent affirmation settling in his heart. No matter how much life tests us, no matter how many secrets still await unveiling, as long as we are honest with each other, this love will conquer everything. Sophie leaned her head against his shoulder, her arms wrapping around his waist, and both felt the rare peace that follows a storm. They knew today was not just a return, but a new beginning, one where trust, love, and understanding were the absolute priorities. The story closed on a note of serenity, yet their eyes still held a determined spark. Love is not perfect, but it is always worth fighting for and preserving. And in the soft morning light, Ethan and Sophie stepped forward, together, onto a path that was challenging but also filled with happiness, where every step was a testament to true love.